Recently, there have been strange movements in China causing significant concern in the United States. These movements are, in brief, China's resort to storing massive quantities of food and essential materials. The Chinese are currently importing food and essential materials in amounts exceeding their normal needs. Why is China doing this? And could it be a sign that China is preparing for a possible invasion of Taiwan soon? This question was the focus of a congressional hearing held by a committee on June 13, 2024. The summary of the session, which lasted about 5.5 hours, is that yes, China's storage of large reserves of essential materials is a possible indicator. In the context of the hearing, at least 2 Americans who testified pointed out that what China is currently doing is similar to what Nazi Germany did during Hitler's time when it stockpiled large quantities of essential materials, especially copper. Another witness at the hearing said Japan did the same before it carried out its attacks in the Pacific during World War II. Consequently, these individuals did not rule out the possibility that China's current actions could be part of its preparations. What strengthens this possibility is that some of China's moves, especially in the food market, have no clear explanation. For example, in the 2023 to 2024 season, Chinese corn production reached a record level, exceeding 288 million tons. This quantity is almost enough for China's annual corn consumption. Despite this, China imported this year large quantities of wheat from Ukraine and Brazil. This move puzzled commodity economist Erland Sturman, who stated in March that he is surprised. What increased his surprise is that China is doing this despite the high cost of wheat. For instance, Ukrainian wheat, to reach China, will have to pass either through the Red Sea or the Cape of Good Hope, and in both cases, shipping costs are high. Here, we need to pause and ask some important questions. If we assume that China is indeed doing all this to prepare for an invasion of Taiwan, why does it need to store large quantities of food while it is actually the largest food producer in the world? This question leads us to a second, equally important question. How much food does the Chinese population, which exceeds 1.4 billion people, need to eat and be satisfied, and how can this food be stored and where? And the third question is, no matter how much food the Chinese government stores, how long will this food last if the US and its allies do what China fears and impose a blockade, trying to starve them in the event of an invasion of Taiwan? Could the food they have stored last them a year, 2 years, or more, or less? And the most important question, why is food such a sensitive issue in China? This is part of what we will discuss together in today's episode. I am Ashraf Ibrahim, the economic commentator. In 1995, American analyst Lester Brown published his famous and controversial book titled Who Will Feed China? At that time, China had started achieving remarkable economic leaps. Brown believed that the rising wealth of the Chinese people, who then numbered over 1.2 billion, would lead to a global food crisis with increased food prices. Why did he believe this, or what was the logic behind his claim? Simply, he believed that the rising wealth and expanding middle class in China would increase their food demands. They would start consuming less rice and more meat, fish, eggs, and dairy products, which depend on grains used as feed. Brown addressed this objection at the beginning of his book, saying that the problem is that densely populated countries like China, when they shift their economy towards manufacturing, inevitably lose a significant portion of their agricultural land.